Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. And before we get started, I just want to give a quick plug for tonight's episode of Armchair Admirals, where me, Drakenifel, and Tucky on the official World of Warships livestream will be discussing the Arctic convoys in general, and the disastrous convoy PQ-17 in particular. That's happening tonight at 1900 Central European Standard Time on the official World of Warships livestream. Now on with today's battle. This is Mad Zebra in the brand new German Tier 8 premium battleship, the Odin. He is unfortunately in a Tier 10 battle here on the hotspot map. The one bit of good news is that at least there aren't any aircraft carriers involved. The Odin is... I don't want to just jump on board the hate train and say it's a bad ship, but it's definitely a difficult ship. And it's difficult for a number of reasons. First, let's talk about the gun caliber. This is a Tier 8 battleship that's only armed with 305mm guns, 12-inch guns, basically the same caliber guns that you see on the Tier 9 and 10 supercruisers, ships like the Azuma, the Yoshino, the Alaska. But this is a Tier 8 battleship. It's not that 12-inch guns are bad at high tier. I mean, they can be good. Just look at Stalingrad in Alaska. But there are other parameters that go into deciding whether or not a gun in World of Warships is good, aside from the caliber. And unfortunately, as far as the Odin's concerned, the only good thing about these guns is the rate of fire, with a 23-second reload. Pretty much everything else is kind of terrible. She has very low penetration with her armour-piercing shells, having to get considerably closer than anybody else to penetrate the same thickness of armour. For example, the Tirpitz can penetrate the Yamato's armour belt at a range of 12 kilometres, but the Odin has to close to within 8 kilometres to achieve the same degree of penetration with its 12-inch shells. The high explosive shells are even worse, with terrible alpha damage and a terrible chance of setting a fire. In fact, they're so bad, and by the way, thank you to Little White Mouse's excellent premium ship review of the Odin for this information, but the 12-inch high explosive shells on the Odin are so bad that the only time you should ever use them in preference over the low penetration armour piercing shells is when the armour piercing is guaranteed to ricochet, because even an armour piercing over penetration with these 12-inch guns is going to do more damage than a direct hit with a high explosive. For example, if one of these 12-inch armour-piercing shells hits a damage-saturated section of an enemy ship and over-penetrates, it's still going to do 3 times as much damage as a 12-inch high-explosive shell hitting the same target. And that terrible high-explosive performance is a fairly big problem for the Odin, because her armour-piercing, as we've already mentioned, has very bad penetration. And 12-inch armour-piercing caps out at 21mm of overmatch, which basically means destroyers and some Tier 6 and 7 cruisers, and this is a Tier 10 battle. There are no Tier 6 or 7 cruisers. So you can probably forget about shooting up enemy battleships, except at anything other than point-blank range, and even against angled cruisers, you pretty much have to aim for the superstructure and hope for lots of over-penetrations. Now that is not an angled cruiser. That Moskva should definitely have known better. And if you get a target like that, well, you can make any gun work, so it's not really surprising that he's doing well when he can actually hit him against a Moskva who's all but broadside on to him. Oh, and there goes today's first victim, the Erland, who rather predictably died while trying to rush a cap that was covered by at least 2 sources of Russian radar and defended by a Dmitry Donskoy, a Moskva, and the Kitakazi that ended up sinking him. No surprises that Mad Zebra has decided, fuck that. He doesn't want to fall victim to any torpedoes. Thank you very much. And he's taking cover around the lee of the island here. And the radar is about to expire, which means he's going to go undetected just in the nick of time, because at this angle he is presenting a flat broadside to the Moskva. So he's managed to get away with it. So if this ship has terrible high explosive, and it does, an armour piercing that's only really effective if somebody's given you a flat broadside at relatively short range, or brawling at point blank range, then surely the solution is to just get in and brawl at point blank range. Well, kind of yes and kind of no. You see, the Odin does have fairly good secondaries. They're not great. We're not talking Grosser Kurfürst or Frederick the Great or even Massachusetts standards here. But they're certainly all right. She's got a lot of them. They have good range, and they're German, of course, so they get quarter caliber penetration with the high explosive shells. And the caliber of the guns, she doesn't have any of those terrible little 100mm guns that you see on French battleships, which make them all but ineffective for anything other than setting fires. Her guns are 128mm and 150mm, so the secondaries can do a reasonably good amount of damage. The only problem is the firing angles are kind of wonky, leading to the Odin having to expose an uncomfortable amount of skirt if it wants to get all of the secondaries firing. But they're not bad, and they're definitely one of the plus points about this ship. The Odin also has very good citadel protection. It's very difficult to citadel the Odin in the same way as it's difficult to citadel the Frederick the Great or the Grosser Kurfürst. She has an icebreaker bow, so it's difficult to overmatch her from the front regardless of the caliber of the guns that you're firing at her. She's got thick decks, she's got a thick upper belt, and she's got good turtleback armour protection around the citadel. And the Moskva apparently didn't learn his lesson the first time. Still coming out and giving that old broadside at ranges of less than 10 kilometres. It's almost as if he's just doing it deliberately to be a good sport and give the Odin a fighting chance. Mad Zebra has just capped, by the way. Yes, in a tier 8 battleship, I know. But anyway, we were saying that's the solution, get in close and brawl. Well, again, yes and no. I mean, she's got good armour, we've just covered that. She's got the Tirpitz's torpedoes and the Bismarck's hydro. And at ranges of 5 kilometres or less, her 12-inch guns will penetrate up to 522mm of armour, so all of the ingredients necessary for a close-range brawling machine, except for the fact that she's got the lowest hit point pool of any Tier 8 battleship in the world. In fact, she's got the lowest hit point pool of any Tier 7 battleship in the world. She has lower health than the New Mexico and the Fuso, which are both Tier 6 battleships. In fact, and this is really embarrassing, she even has less health than the Congo, which is a Tier 5 battleship. And that's an incredibly dangerous combination when you really do have to get in close and brawl in order to make the most of this ship's limited advantages. Now, you could, of course, just do a Geyser now, YOLO in, get to within 6 kilometres, fire off your torpedoes, do maybe 50,000 damage and then die and call it a day. Or you could do what Mad Zebra is doing and play very, very carefully. Look after that limited health pool and just wait for the opportunities. Now, to a degree, this means you're probably going to have to rely on your teammates to do the carrying for the first half of the battle. So straight away you can see the limitations imposed by that tactic. So if you're looking to carry a team full of potatoes, you probably shouldn't really be playing the Odin. Certainly not in a Tier 10 battle. On the other hand, if your team are capable of at least thinking and breathing at the same time to some degree, the Odin is definitely one of those ships that does become progressively more dangerous the longer it can survive in a battle, and the less health its opponents have to fight back with. Although I do realise that's not exactly a glowing recommendation, because that's basically true of every ship in the game, but hey, I'm clutching at straws here. Come on, work with me. So, Mad Zebra's done 55,000 damage, which isn't bad at this stage of a battle for a Tier 8 battleship in a Tier 10 battle, although that's largely down to the enemy Moskva, who was determined to make it as easy as possible for Mad Zebra to citadel him. The team do have 2 of the caps now, although they're trailing by 1 kill. Mad Zebra's team are, however, flipping a 3rd cap. And that is when the friendly Alsace, who just took out the enemy Jean Bart, has an extremely close encounter with an enemy Isamo. Both ships ramming each other and depleting the available number of ships on each team by a further 1. Now that happened on the other side of the map, so I have no idea whether or not that was a good or a bad trade for either the Isamo or the Alsace. Mad Zebra in a currently extremely one-sided gunnery duel with the enemy Ohio over there, firing high explosive, and is very lucky to get 2 fires, and actually a reasonable number of hits there. Pretty soon both of these 2 ships are going to be in secondary gun battery range of each other. And when that happens, I would kind of expect the Odin to come out on top because of the increased high explosive penetration values of its 128 and 150mm guns compared to the Ohio's 127mm guns. The Ohio is now starting to straighten out and present a bit of a broadside target, and ideally I would have liked to have seen Mad Zebra switch to armour-piercing shells now. The range is looking pretty good. But he's still using the high explosive, and this is one of those occasions that perfectly illustrates the value of the expert loader skill, particularly on a ship like the Odin. If he'd had the expert loader skill, he would almost certainly been able to take advantage of a 50% reduced reload when swapping ammunition types in guns that are already loaded, and have been able to unload an armour-piercing salvo into the broadside belt of the Ohio over there, and might have even sunk him. But, well, he didn't. So that's kind of unfortunate, although at the same time, the Ohio was only engaging him with secondaries. He's got far, far more juicy targets to shoot at over there on the western map border, an Aegir and an Ibuki, who are both given the Ohio broadsides to shoot at, and they are just cruisers. Looks like the Ibuki's launched torpedoes, none of which appear to have hit the Ohio, and our friend Dmitri has just popped up on the far side of the island. Looks like the Moskva's relocated, so the source of the earlier radar was the Dmitry Donskoy. Mad Zebra's team do still have the cap advantage, although the enemy team are now starting to flip capture point Delta. And the enemy team definitely still have the kill advantage. In fact, they've extended it by a couple of kills, and they're about to extend it by one further as the Dmitry Donskoy that we just spotted behind the island up to the north lobs a salvo across the middle of the map, takes out the friendly Kitakazi, which means that the Aegir and the Ibuki over there on the western map border are now Mad Zebra's only two surviving teammates, which means that Mad Zebra is now sailing towards the entirety of the rest of the enemy team, although they have managed to take out the Ohio at least, and he's in a tier 8 battleship with a tier 5 battleship health pool, with a Dmitry Donskoy to his north, a Moskva, Azuma, Izumo and Bismarck to his east, and they're all heading this way, and they can all see him. Well, shit. So he's sitting here in 41,000 hit points worth of Odin with 100,000 hit points worth of Azuma and Izumo closing in on him. However, there is a spot of good news. That flare that just got launched was the Gunter Lutjen's captain skill exemplary reconnaissance going off after spotting the Izumo and the Azuma. Now, it's not a lot, but it does mean that after spotting 3 ships, it just triggered a heal. 300 hit points per second for 8 seconds because he's a tier 8 ship. It didn't help much, of course, because player 4 has just entered the battle. The Moskva's back. He's now down to 34,000 health, facing about 130,000 hit points worth of enemy ships. And let's not forget, the Dmitry Donskoy is still lurking around the northern side of the island over there. He is taking a bit of a battering here, thick armour or not. What to do, what to do. He does have the Ibuki and the Aegir rushing to his assistance, but it's going to be a while before they can make much difference with their firepower, and of course now is the perfect opportunity for our friend Dmitry to start making a pain in the arse out of himself as well. Every consumable is on cooldown. He's down to 27,000 health, and he can't sit here getting farmed by the Dmitry Donskoy's frankly terrifying high explosive firepower, so he decides, fuck it. Chicks dig scars, glory lasts forever, hold my beer, I'm going in. He guns the engine and starts lurching forwards, and for some reason both the Moskva and the Azuma have decided they don't actually want to finish him off, and they've managed to put an island between themselves and him, so that's nice. Although the Moskva is doing his level best to make up for that error, and does manage to get some punishing high explosive salvos off, which in combination with some 16-inch armour-piercing over-penetrations from the Izumo drops Mad Zebra down to a quite frankly scary 14,000 health. But the Moskva appears to have forgotten what happens when you give broadside to an Odin's 12-inch guns at this kind of range, and eats even more citadels for his trouble, which makes it simple for Mad Zebra's secondaries to finish the Moskva off. There's the close quarters expert award, and as he closes in to do a Ganizer now against the Izumo, who appears to have just remembered at the last possible moment that, hang on, this thing's got torpedoes, doesn't it? Which forces an emergency manoeuvre from the Izumo, which does succeed in avoiding 2 of the torpedoes. An emergency turn which has resulted in all of the Izumo's 16-inch main battery guns pointing in the wrong direction and unable to fire. However, that one turret to the rear is looking like it's starting to sneak around, so Mad Zebra noses in, points the icebreaker bow towards him, and, well, one dead Izumo. And after gaining 100 secondary gun battery hits, the secondary armament expert skill triggers, so they're all firing 15% faster now, just in time for the Azuma to repeat the Moskva's mistake, pop out from around the side of the island, and who was only saved from instant deletion because the rear turrets were the only ones that had a clear shot. Unfortunately, the wreck of the sinking Izumo isn't sinking fast enough and managed to block all 6 shots from the front turrets, which would almost certainly have sunk the Azuma if they'd managed to fire without being occluded. But there's the high caliber award, 201,000 damage. The Azuma's guns weren't even pointing this way when he came around the side of the island. I think he was probably expecting Mad Zebra to be dead after running into a crossfire between an Izumo and a Moskva. So you can kind of understand his mistake, even if it is kind of funny. Oh, he's given broadside again. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. So desperate to finish off the A gear, and it was the Bismarck over there who's probably wondering how his team could possibly have fucked this up so badly. Oh, Dmitri has finally decided to get involved. Now, Dmitri's 180mm high explosive shells are no joke. Luckily, he's taken an awfully long time to get his guns pointing in this direction, and the wreck of the Izumo has finally sunk to a degree sufficient for Mad Zebra to start angling away, probably in anticipation of the Dmitri Donskoy firing armour-piercing instead. But what the hell is he doing? Instead of turning in and taking these terrible 12-inch armour-piercing shells on the nose, which he absolutely could have done, he's instead turning to give more broadside in a cruiser. And he's incredibly lucky to not get instantly deleted in the process. But, well, there's luck and then there's luck. He's just popped his radar, which is the signature call of the cruiser captain who knows that he's just fucked up and he's about to die as he runs himself aground. And that just leaves the Bismarck, who's probably asking himself, how is it possible for my team to have fucked this up so incredibly badly? Well, that's a very good question, Mr. Bismarck. I suspect that's a question that's going to be challenging philosophers for years to come. But we've all seen it happen before. We shouldn't be surprised. Now at this point, with a fairly substantial points lead and both teams holding exactly the same number of caps, even if the Ibuki dies to the Bismarck, which does seem likely, it's not going to be enough for the Bismarck. Mad Zebra's team are still going to win on points, as long as Mad Zebra doesn't do anything stupid, like trying to win any harder than he has to. Because we've all seen it happen. But while the Bismarck is targeting the Ibuki, which we can tell because the priority target indicator isn't going off, there's no reason to not farm more damage on him. At the same time, of course, let's not be stupid about it. I mean, the Bismarck could easily switch targets, and it may be a secondary spec Bismarck, so there's no reason to get within secondary gun battery range and allow the Bismarck to basically fight 2 targets at the same time. So as long as he's concentrating his main gun batteries, his 15-inch guns on the Ibuki, and Mad Zebra stays out of secondary gun battery range, he can continue to rain shells down on him from extreme range, while at the same time, just to be on the safe side, flipping one of those enemy capture points. Which also has the added benefit of keeping him far enough away from the Bismarck that if he does kill the Ibuki and come looking for that last kill, it's going to be extremely easy for him to disengage, go undetected, run the clock timer down, and just win the game on points. I do like to see this. All too often, you see that team, that winning team, suddenly decide to throw caution to the wind and try to win that little bit harder than is absolutely necessary. And it looks like Mad Zebra's seen a couple of my YouTube videos too, or watched some of Flamu's live streams, because he's definitely not falling for that old gag. And the Ibuki, who is apparently nobody's fool, is doing his level best to keep his distance, kiting away from the Bismarck, showering him with high explosive shells and probably dropping torpedoes in his wake as well. All of which means that this is pretty much now a foregone conclusion. Mad Zebra's more than halfway through flipping the cap, the Bismarck is still completely ignoring him, he's still totally free. Farm those last little bits of credits and XP at 0 risk to himself whatsoever. And in the dying seconds of the match, the Bismarck gets well and truly fed up with trying to chase down a kiting Ibuki and starts shooting at something that he has an outside chance of actually hitting, but it is far too little and far too late. The match ends, the Bismarck survives, and Mad Zebra has done nearly 300,000 damage in a tier 10 battle in a, well, quite frankly, pretty bad tier 8 battleship. earning himself a quite frankly ridiculous nearly 3,600 base experience in the process. The Odin is definitely nobody's idea of a particularly good ship. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's definitely not great. And in a tier 10 battle like this, I don't think anybody was expecting Mad Zebra to get a result like that, least of all Mad Zebra, but, well, he did, which just proves that it doesn't matter how bad the ship is. It's what you do with it that counts. Mad Zebra, well done. Everyone else, hope you enjoyed it, because that's it for today. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.